So it's not clickbait. This is in fact the biggest transformer ever made. And not by any particularly small amount either.
Rewrote the song. Thoughts become action. Tell me what's happening. What's your mind wrapped around?
The last official record was held by HasLab Unicron, and then unofficially there was this oversized knockoff Optimus, but that's kind of a cheat. I don't really count that. Either way, I guess it doesn't matter, because this one absolutely wipes the floor with both of those.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, it's so heavy.
That is so much. Oh.
That's insane.
Basically, every year since 2014, Hasbro's released one giant $200 figure that's called a Titan class. It's the largest figure that they manufacture, and those average around 20 inches tall and weigh 5 pounds, which is a lot of plastic. Then in 2021, Hasbro started this crowdfunding campaign to make the biggest Transformer ever. It was called HasLab Unicron, and that figure stands at a whopping 27 inches tall. The funny thing is, even though he's only about 7 inches taller than a Titan on paper, his mass makes it so much exponentially higher thanks to the laws of physics that he weighs nearly 3 times more at 16 pounds. So that leads us back to earlier this year when a third-party company called W Resources released their very own crime against humanity. And for reasons only known to God himself, he stands at 47 inches tall. That's 4 feet, nearly double the height of the last record. That could mislead you to think that he's twice this size. And he's definitely not. Thanks to his exponential mass, he rounds out to being 5.6 times bigger than Unicron. That's 18 times the size of a Titan. He weighs 90 pounds. This is Metroplex, a character from that original 1986 animated movie, and it took 3 enormous boxes and 4 months for this to get all the way to my doorstep, which, by the way, is just the perfect amount of time to feel like a crippling level of buyer's remorse.
Oop, that transformed.
But I had all that time to measure it out, to make space, get hyped up, and it turns out that none of that mattered. There's no way to wrap your head around this and what it's gonna be like until it's standing in your living room. So I'm gonna try my best to show you. Let's start with the robot mode. So right up front, this is a very different take on the original character from that movie. It's got a more stylized look that I think some people might prefer. And it's kind of funny because I'm typically the person who's against third-party stylistic changes, but I'm actually on board with this. In hand, I have a theory that one of the reasons they went this route was just to let them design whatever body proportions that they needed so that he could stand upright, like larger feet, smaller torso, stuff like that. I'm sure they also realized that something this massive would benefit from having more detailing than maybe the typical G1 crowd might want from a G1 accurate Metroplex. Either way, I think it turned out pretty sick, and I've decided my headcanon is that this is the War for Cybertron Siege Metroplex, since he's got the beefy, detailed look that I love from that line. The only gripe I have with the style is how absurdly small the head is. Like, I definitely see what they were going for, and it looked fine over pictures, but I'm telling you, something about this makes him look like a small child wearing a robot costume. I don't know what that's about. I know that's oddly specific, but I promise you pick up on this stuff real quick when you've got a buffed out, fully weaponized child lurking in the corner of your studio.
I'm going to make them suffer, Cal. I will take them all from you.
Oh, and speaking of weapons, I think I might be caught in the middle of an arms deal trade because this layer of revolvers most definitely put me on an FBI watch list. I do like how many they included, and they have a pretty cool look to them, but some of the ports that they plug into are absurdly tight. So, I'm just gonna leave this on my front porch for whoever needs to hear this. I did not ask for these. Come to think of it, I don't even like guns. I actually think I hate guns. Like, I do hate guns. There's a few different light up features across the figure, and something pretty neat is that you can turn on each of them by tapping them with this included magnet keycard. They're magnet activated, which is actually a very elegant solution compared to most other premium brands like Hot Toys and 3-0. I like this. The actual metal card itself is cool in theory, but it's been carved out of like stainless steel, which is kind of like using a chainsaw to cut your ham and cheese sandwich. It's just comically heavy and clearly designed by people who are right on the cusp of discovering that it could have fit in a wallet. They didn't quite make it though. Keep going, boys, you got this. The lightness chest unexpectedly has some of the easiest battery replacements I think I've ever seen on a figure. It literally just pops right out and doesn't even have a cover over the battery. It's awesome. I'm gonna keep it real though, I couldn't tell you anything about the finger lights because those would have required 10 more 2032 batteries. And you know, that would have been wasteful. And that's just not who I am. I don't know. I couldn't bring myself to harm an ant if I tried. Nobody loves the environment more than me. And safety. Overall, I'm really impressed with the articulation. It's about on par with maybe like a little bit below a masterpiece figure, and that's a huge accomplishment in its own right just because of how much these joints have to sustain. But it also kind of has to be.
What a little fatty.
Something that I've started realizing at the scale is that your brain stops comparing him to other figures and a lot more to like the articulation of a real person. As in, I haven't once been concerned with whether he can pose in like a mid-air power jump while holding his blaster like 86 Optimus, but I'm really gonna need him to be able to sit on the couch like me, or there's gonna be a problem. You see what I'm saying? Like, he's functionally a person who has to live in the person world, and people are extremely flexible, which he exceeds at. But they're also extremely heavy, and that leads us to the first major issue that this thing faces. His limbs have this impossible task of needing to be stiff enough to hold up a ludicrous amount of weight while not being so tight that they're impossible to adjust. And the larger the figure gets, the more narrow that sweet spot becomes, naturally. The thing is, they didn't really find that balance. Now, there were some rumors that circulated right before this came out about how you couldn't leave him standing or his leg joints would break over time, but that pretty quickly turned out to be a mistranslation from a Chinese statement that was corrected, but of course not before getting spread around and taken as gospel by everyone who heard it from someone who read it from a comment that read it from another comment. So, you know, average Tuesday for the Transformers community. Point is, as far as anyone knows yet, that's not a problem, but the quality control isn't exactly confidence-inducing. His knees and elbows and fingers do a pretty solid job of finding that balance, but the connection for the thigh rotation is terrifying. You can see this vicious gap spreading between the parts whenever there's any pressure, and whenever you're trying to lift him up or lay him down on the ground, which is already a two-person task, his legs are just waiting to slump to the sides. His arms have the exact opposite problem. I don't know why W Resources thought that his shoulders had to support the full weight of a moderately sized school bus, but those ratchets require some full body force to move. Oh! I'm being serious. I have some bruises on my arm. His ankles are the same way, but at least those make sense given that they have to hold every pound of the entire figure. These are the arms. Now, you might be thinking it's at least better to be safe than sorry, right? The thing is, I'd be along for that ride if it weren't for the even bigger issue, the assembly.
They don't really tell. Oh, they tell me in Chinese what screws they should be.
The only connection that they use to secure his arms to the torso is by slotting this shallow plastic wedge into a pocket very loosely and mounting 2 screws from the bottom. You can watch the entire joint dripping down the second you let go. It feels so wrong.
I despise that.
Even crazier, they use that exact same method to assemble the legs. It's just 2 screws holding hollow plastic to hollow plastic without any metal lining the inside of the screw holes. I don't care if the plastic was kissed by an angel. It's plastic, and it can only hold so much. If you don't believe me, I've been waiting to show you guys the worst part.
No. Oh yeah, the foot's like falling apart.
When I unboxed his legs, his left heel had completely fallen apart. I was hoping that it was just because of a loose screw that I could put back in, but instead the plastic was shattered right where the screws were holding it together. So in case I kept it too nicely hidden throughout the video so far, half the figure stability and most of my mental stability has been missing during this production. I really just couldn't wait another 4 months in hoping that I get some replacements, and I gotta pay bills. So a lot of prayers again through this transformation. Now, transforming this isn't really fun, but that's not the fault of W Resources. It's more about the nature of Metroplexes, or Metroplex. If you didn't know, he's always turned into some kind of city, like an Autobot battle base, or more commonly, a guy sitting down trying his least to look like a battle base. And you know, it's been a good run, spending these last few years laughing at this mode with you good folks. It's just, now it mostly scares me, and I won't be doing that anymore. There's basically just no easy way to get this thing on the ground, or from the ground, or transformed. It's no joke. And I'm also going to be brave just to confess on behalf of all the other 3 guys who own this that it cannot be transformed without help, okay? I know, listen, none of us wanted to say it. I know you think you could, you can't. We all thought we could, but we can't keep this bottled up anymore. And I will be starting a support group soon. Keep in mind, he's not just heavy, he's also awkward and sharp.
Thanks a lot.
And made of plastic that will break.
Nice. Okay.
And speaking of things that no man wants to confess, you think your dad doesn't cry? Watch him break a $1,200 figure that he just bought, and let me know how that goes. Also, yeah, this thing was $1,200, which is insane, but I try and justify it by remembering that the price went up to $1,600 right after I pulled the trigger. So when you look at it like that, I've saved $400. Not that I'm needing, or that we're doing well. I can afford it. Sorry, right, unrelated. This video is sponsored by Smallrig. If you've ever so much as even done like a quick Amazon search for any type of film gear, odds are you've seen their stuff listed. It might just be one of my favorite companies of all time. If there's anything that you take away from this ad segment before you finish doing whatever's clearly stopped you from skipping forward, like eating food and you're just now realizing what's playing, it's that next time you see their stuff listed and you wonder about it, you can trust them. Go for it. Now, if you're still here because you're busy wiping, I get to show you their brand new Tribex SC tripod and X99 battery. The Tribex's headline feature is this hydraulic clutch handle that you press to immediately release all the legs so that that you can raise the height, level it on crooked surface, it locks right back into place. I bought the original Tribex with my own money, and I refuse to use anything else now during my video productions. This SE version is now a much more budget option at half the cost, and I'm honestly super surprised at how comparable they are. But I gotta say, their X99 might be the coolest a battery's ever been. And the real showstopper is this touchscreen where you can view all the power stats for each of the outputs, or even wirelessly using the mobile app. Both of these brand new products get a 15% discount when you use my link in the description, so make sure you guys check that out. Okay, thanks again to Smallrig for sponsoring this video. Okay, so the elephant's out of the room, or in the bag, or wherever you want the elephant, he's there. It's a silly looking alt mode, no different than it always has been, but I honestly don't mind this for that reason. I've always had this love for like miniature builds and sets since I was a kid, and even though I'd usually consider this inexcusable, it really is so outrageously massive that enough figures surrounding him can kind of trick you into seeing a robot city, which is also why I'm very happy that they made his head removable. I know taking it off isn't accurate, I get that, but while we're at it, you might have noticed that this whole setup isn't accurate. I just kind of made whatever tweaks I thought might help it not look like this.
Hey fellas, we are about 85% of the way done with this video filming, and I've just now realized that the waist was rotated backwards the entire time. Don't worry about it, guys.
The helipad also looks really good. I think it does a lot of the heavy lifting for the looks in this mode because it's nice and big and it folds out from the left side of his chest using this chunky hinge. In general, wherever this behemoth has a wide flat surface, I think turned out pretty cool. But that is ultimately my biggest disappointment. With this much surface area and all these wide open panels, it's so tragic to me that he's not packed to the brim with hidden doors and unfolding ramps and different compartments. Like, I totally get that adding more major transformation hinges would have compromised stability, but there's no reason he couldn't have added a bunch of microplay features hidden everywhere. This bugs me so much because it's really what plagues the whole figure is designer laziness. It's a lot of little things that make for a frustrating experience. His arms don't tab into anything for city mode. They just kind of float in place and make you think you're doing something wrong. His torso leans back ever so slightly, which makes cars roll off of it, and it's probably because they left the weight of the entire upper body to this razor thin fold out stand from the crotch.
Oh! Get off. Okay. No, camera's like barely too close. Why? Back on the chair.
And his rifles could have even made contact with the ground as an extra support since they're mounted on the shoulder, but they're barely too short. Even though I love how easy the batteries are to replace, why on earth doesn't he just use AAA batteries instead of button cells? That's always been a size restriction that they don't have here. And honestly, I could have forgiven so much of this if they'd at least tossed in some standard 5mm ports around the figure. At no extra cost to them, he could have suddenly been compatible with blast effects and weaponizers and all the figures that we already have. It's just, this figure's the kind of thing where it'd be so cool for my younger brothers to be able to get to play with when they visit, or, you know, nieces and nephews, because I'm stuck with this guy. So if I can use him to help secure my title as the cool uncle, that might be $1,200 well spent. Instead, there's just so little to see here after the shock value's worn off, and that's what the robot mode was for.
Well, you got all the early morning sprinklers going off at the same time.
So typically, I try to avoid hard set questions and answers when summarizing my thoughts on a figure, but I think it's kind of necessary here. So there's 3 questions that I'm going to answer.
There he goes.
Number 1, why did I get this figure? Number 2, is it worth the crazy $1,200 price tag? And number 3, am I personally glad that I got it? All right, so starting with number 1, I got this figure because it's incomprehensibly big. And come on, we all want to know what that's like. For question number 2, is this worth the asking price? So I'm actually really excited to show you guys this, because to answer that, we're going to go back to the first comparison that I made at the beginning of the video. Like I said, Metroplex has 5.6 times more mass than even HasLab Unicron, but when it comes to common Transformers that you can go find in stores, they sell $25 deluxe class figures, $35 Voyager classes, and $55 leader classes. I measured out the average weight of each size class, and it turns out that you would have to combine 180 leader class figures to equal the mass of Metroplex, or 477 deluxes, which means you'd have to spend $12,000 in deluxes or $10K in leader classes. Now, obviously, that's not how the supply chain or retail costs work at all. I mean, it's common sense, but most products get cheaper proportionately as the quantity being sold together goes up. It's why people buy in bulk, or why a lot of times toy companies will like bundle older figures together in a set to make them cheaper for you to buy, which somebody might want to remind Hasbro of that one, because I think they forgot. Either way, the same rules apply here with Metroplex. But even then, factoring that in, no matter how much you try to squash the gap between those numbers, it really is kind of crazy that this figure doesn't cost more than $1,200. What you get for it, it's pretty comparable. Which leads me to question number 3.
Hey, what are you doing?
So if I didn't express it enough during my naturally deadpan reaction for the unboxing, putting together a robot toy the size of a small human is objectively one of the coolest things that a nerd can experience. The absurd shipping wait times, the quality control, the troubleshooting, all of that was made worth it at the time. But having to deal with it ever since, that may not be. See, I was blindsided but still technically prepared for the space that this would take up. I had a plan for that. What I didn't have a plan for was the logistics of owning a 90-pound figure. If I've ever needed to move my couch or haul a bookshelf into my studio without anyone's help, then it is what it is. I'll figure it out. It'll get there. But I had this interesting moment during that first day unboxing him where I literally just had to come to terms with accepting that I actually can't just find a way to move him whenever I need to. I'm gonna kill myself. If I gotta get him from upstairs to downstairs when my wife isn't home, tough luck. I can't. There is no solution if I don't want to break the figure or my own bones trying not to break the figure. And that lack of control over this thing that now sits 3 feet away from me, it's turned out to be just this mild stress that lives in the back of my mind. Between that and the lack of reasons that I ever had to get him back to a city mode, I do have this lingering question of where he belongs and how I get him there now that this video is done. Why?
I'm like in real time trying to imagine all the things that I've imagined doing with this. Poses and like cool shots for the video. I'm just suddenly realizing how impossible this all might be. 90 pounds of dead plastic weight is so much more than I could have possibly imagined.
And it goes without saying, but none of this is something that I have to worry about with my $20 War for Cybertron figures that fit in the palm of my hand. And yeah, I am fully aware that that's what most of you wanted to hear when you clicked on this video, but it is true. Which leads me to the part where I get to deliver a heartfelt, emotional speech about how money was never the answer, and it can't make you happy, even though it only ever seems to be the happy people with a lot of money who want to tell you that. And then I'll bravely declare that this figure is in fact ridiculous and unnecessary, and I'll insist that you should never buy it, as if any normal person was actually considering it. And then lastly, to really convey just how relatable I am, I'll say that it'd be pretty cool to see a third-party company make just like a slightly smaller, little more reasonably sized version of this figure, so that every Metroplex fan, every Transformers fan could enjoy it. Either way, maybe just actually make a version of him that'll fit in your, in your pocket. You guys didn't actually think that I was gonna make the entire video without mentioning another figure, did you?
Yeah, and I think I got one. Yeah, I got one.
So not like fancy windows, mostly just square, larger windows.
Yes, I need you to resist every urge in your body to add details to this. It can't be too cool. You know what I mean?
Not really.
One of the goals of designing these buildings specifically was finding a way to incorporate into the architecture and the design of the buildings the breaks that I naturally have to have for the 3D printer. And all these buildings are upwards of like 30 to 40 inches tall.
I have to segment them into different prints, and so each one ends up being like 3 or 4 prints worth. I want things to be as small as possible to make Metroplex feel as big as possible, but if I add just too many details or just scale it down to where the windows are too small, it suddenly no longer looks like an intentional prototype design. It looks like you just made an overly simple and a dumb looking building, which is also why it's just important that I never varied from the color palette.
All right, testing. This is QC label V12. Note to self, this is to accompany shot V8 with cooler lighting. When it comes to a lot of the smaller parts of the city, I've got them organized here into different drawers. These are road signs and stands, and there's a lot of stuff not in these that are, scattered everywhere. It's a mess. And then you got the trees that I've kind of built these little stands into so I can rearrange them as needed, as opposed to like these street lamps that I had to glue to the surface. And you got the cars over here. There is a lot of minivans because that's the best vehicle, and I needed everyone to know that. So yeah.
You talked about a car. Kind of how big are we talking?
Kind of the size of a Hot Wheel. The exact size. If we could have it kind of like a skin on the outside with the wheels attached to it.
Oh.
So it has to be non-functional.
There's 2 different scales for the cars, and the reason why is because there's some shots where I really wanted to force a perspective and have them off in the distance and make them look a little bit relatively smaller compared to the Transformers or Metroplex, and so sometimes I'd have the larger ones in the foreground and the smaller ones in the background. This
figure's so freaking enormous that I literally cannot film most of the shots I need in my studio. So we found a really big gymnasium that I can turn all the lights off and take 4 different trips with our minivan full, chock full. So over the next 3 days, maybe I'll get the shots I need. Then and only then will I be about 10% of the way done with this video. And yes, I will be dragging my wife into all of this. I'm not gonna pay people to help me, okay?
It would look better if those corners were kind of shut down, dropped down a little bit.
It sounds like it'd look a little too cool.
There's no such thing as that.
All right, well, what did we talk about when it comes to questioning my authority?